We are partway through patch 1.3 in Zenless Zone Zero, but with patch 1.4 just around the corner, there are a lot of things to look forward to. And no, I'm not talking about Miyabi and Harumasa. Although those are definitely two important things that will be coming, there are quite a few other changes that will be coming in 1.4 based off of what the devs themselves have said. And for those of you that either forgot or didn't know, today we'll go over 6 new things that we can expect to see in patch 1.4. The first and probably the most important is the change to the Decibel system, or the ultimate system. In a face-to-face talk with the devs, they mentioned exploring options where instead of the team building up to 3000 decibels and having all of those points be used for one agent's ultimate skill, they are looking into a shared decibel system instead. This is going to be a huge change to the gameplay in Zenless Zone Zero, and honestly, I'm all for it. After all, they are animators that spent a lot of time working on some of those really cool animations, but right now, it feels like the ultimates are only ever used by the main DPS agent in the squad. But from a gameplay perspective, this could actually bring a bit of a change for viable teams. A lot of the non-attacker agents have some nice benefits on their ultimates. Firstly, almost all of these support agents provide 10 energy for all members and then another 20 for whoever switches in next after their ultimate. Defenders, they can provide 3 extra assist points when they ultimate, so that means that you can get off more parries, which in turn for defenders usually means a lot more stuns. And at least for some agents, they even have special effects for their own kit. The first example is Qingyi, where after using her ultimate, she fills up her gauge that allows her to use that enhanced basic attack that applies the increased stun multiplier. So imagine this, you stun the enemy once with Qingyi regularly, as you would normally, then you do the typical DPS rotation with someone like say Shuyen, dumping out all of her enhanced bullets and then her ultimate, but now also you have Nicole's ultimate in there too, which gives energy back to the whole team. And then as soon as they recover from that stun, you go back to Qingyi, use her ultimate now too, which does a huge amount of days since again, she is a stun agent after all. And then because of the extra bit of energy from Nicole and the full gauge, you do her enhanced basic attack, maybe throw out an EX special or 2, and who knows, with all 3 of those combined, maybe that's another instant stun right away, or at least somewhat close to another stun. Or another agent that refills their gauge is Bernice, who gets 50% of her gauge back when she uses her ultimate. And it also triggers a quick assist. This will make keeping Bernice's afterburn effect up much easier. Since for me at least personally, it feels like whenever I do stun the enemy, if I don't use Bernice's ultimate, then the afterburn effect usually fizzes out like halfway through the stun period. Because in my mind, I'm like, oh, I need to attack with my DPS agent. I can't waste time switching over to Bernice just to rebuild that meter again. But now there's no worry, you can use both. And I think in the future, for any other agents that are going to be coming out, they will now also have this change in mind when their kits are being designed, knowing that they will actually have their ultimates be used. So hopefully we can have more of these ultimates that actually interact with the agent's kit and not just say, oh, it's an attack with a big multiplier and that's the ultimate essentially. Now, the one maybe concern kind of that might happen is that the game turns into Genshin Impact, where it feels like all you do is you cycle between skills and ultimates non-stop throughout all of your different characters, never using actual basic attacks or dodges or stuff like that. But I think this won't be an issue, as the decibel generation rate right now isn't exactly that fast. And I imagine that the generation rate will probably be adjusted to not have everyone be able to spam the ultimates once the shared system is in place. Maybe it's similar to energy, where the main agent on the field can actually have a standard generation rate while the ones off field have a sort of reduced regeneration rate. And also there aren't many decibel generation effects aside from, I think, Puffer Electro, right? Unlike how Genshin Impact has energy regen. The second thing that we can expect to see in patch 1.4 is something that has slowly been introduced over the past few patches, and that is the ability to switch which character you use when roaming around in the overworld. First, it was between Belle and Weiss, and then Caesar and Bernice were added, and then Lighter and Yanagi were also added. Now, supposedly in patch 1.4, we will be able to use any of our contracted agents for overworld exploration. Now, I'll be honest, this is kind of cool, I guess. It does suck though that as soon as you interact with anyone, you switch back to your original sibling of choice, but I suppose that does make sense. You can't have 2 Belles speak to each other. And personally speaking, I haven't really used this feature that much so far. At most, it's as soon as I get a new agent, I'll walk around with them just to, admire their model, which I'm sure everyone else does as well. But one thing that I really hope is added that would make me use this feature a lot more is the ability to use the selfie mode while using any of these agents. Although I think I understand why it's not in place right now, having to animate all of those those different emotions or poses that you do in the selfie mode for every agent will probably take a while too. But maybe in the future that is something we can look forward to. Next up, the third thing that we can see in 1.4 is something that we really only have one example of, but it's the quote-unquote continuous improvement of models to provide an improved visual experience. This is pretty much specifically just for Miyabi, who at launch had a slightly different looking face, which a lot of people were memeing on, specifically with the wide Miyabi faces, which honestly I started to get used to even. So it's kind of weird to me that the new one feels odd, considering I'm so used to the wide Miyabi. But to be honest, in a vacuum, if you show either one of these models to me, I wouldn't really have an issue with either of them. But it is good to know that the developers are very conscious of trying to make agents as appealing as possible for the audience. It's a good sign in general for the future. Of course, we don't have many other examples of agents revealed early enough who could still go through some visual updates. So this was mostly just for Miyabi essentially. Point number 4 is again something from the redo renovations talk way back in patch 1.0, and that is the continuous optimization of the interface and combat UI, which I feel like we have been getting a bit of so far in patch 1.3. I imagine these as the quality of life changes that we've been getting over time. For example, the revamped weekly stuff, but I'd also like to lump in just any of the other general quality of life stuff in this section too. So far, we've had some great things like the energy overflow reserves, being able to farm notorious hunts more than 3 times a week, being able to access training from anywhere via the compendium, being able to switch agents easily in the training mode, and then also streamlining the whole upgrade process when it comes to, choosing materials to craft up and stuff like that. And I mean, so far it feels like every single patch there's been something new that has improved the quality of life in the game. So hopefully in 1.4 there are even more optimizations to come. Now additions number 5 and 6 are a bit more of a speculation, but I think there's a good reason to believe that they will be real based on past patterns. So it's expected that 1.4 is going to be a main chapter similar to patch 1.2. That is to say, the story won't be a special story like Yanagi's or Jane and Seth's, but rather one where we as Phaethon truly get involved and find out more about the overarching story of the Lockbox or Pearlman, or now apparently Hollow Zero. This is because in the 1.3 livestream, they mentioned that although we would be introduced to Section 6 now, we would have to wait a bit to see how exactly they help Phaethon out. And I would imagine that that time is going to be in 1.4. So based on what was introduced in patch 1.2, we can very likely expect to see similar things, namely new expert challenge and notorious hunt bosses, and of course the associated new material drops for core skills. And then of course it is very likely that the new agents in the patch, Harumasa and Miyabi, will almost certainly use these new materials themselves. The other new introduction we can probably expect are 2 new disc sets. Again, patch 1.2 introduced sets that were tailor-made for Bernice and Caesar, and so it's highly likely that we will get new disc sets in 1.4 that will also favor Harumasa and Miyabi. So if I were you, I'd be a bit hesitant on trying to pre-farm disc sets for these two. I mean, you still can, but just know that you might only be able to use a 2-piece set for them out of the current disc sets that we have available to us. But for now though, those are some of the things that we can all look forward to in patch 1.4, aside of course from the arrival of Harumasa and Miyabi, and maybe a potential Ellen Joe rerun, since again, historically in other MiHoYo games like Star Rail and Genshin, 1.4 had the first banner rerun, which featured the original first limited agent. Now, patch 1.4 will be on the 18th of November, which is essentially when Lighter's banner ends and 1.3 comes to a close, which is just over 2 weeks away. And so we can actually expect to see a 1.4 preview livestream sometime soon. I would guesstimate that say maybe Friday the 6th or maybe the Saturday is when we would expect to see this. And then of course in this official livestream, we will get information on all of these upcoming changes to the game, as well as the details of Miyabi and Harumasa's kits. Now, I myself am honestly just excited to see where the story goes next, but let me know in the comments down below what you are most excited for in patch 1.4. Otherwise though, if you found this video helpful, liking, commenting and subscribing is greatly appreciated, and it also helps you stay in the loop for more Zenless Zone Zero news. But until next time though, thanks for watching and bye bye!